Now, climate change is threatening the very future of Ireland's heritage sites. Doonbeg Fort in Kerry and the Rock of Cashel are among the historical monuments and places that are in peril due to extreme weather. A new draft plan setting out how we try and tackle this environmental challenge has now been published by the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, and it says that we need to prepare for, quote, the potential closure of heritage sites leading to a loss of heritage value and tourism revenue, as well as health and safety risks due to sudden coastal erosion incidents. Dr. Sarah Kerr is here. She's a research fellow based in the Trinity Longroom Hub of Arts and Humanities Research Institute. Dr. Sarah Kerr, thank you very much for coming in to us this morning. Climate change affecting heritage sites. Is Ireland particularly vulnerable?
Thank you very much. Yes, it is indeed. So we're all aware of climate change and how our global temperature over the past 100 years has increased by about 1 degree Celsius. But what we're coming to terms with now is how climate change is impacting our heritage. And by heritage, we mean sort of everything that represents our past. So our buildings, our monuments, our landscapes, and indeed our material culture as well. So our handheld artefacts. And climate change is impacting all of these. And the impacts are unfortunately overwhelmingly detrimental. So climate change is causing damage to, and in some cases, the complete loss of heritage. Ireland is particularly vulnerable. We are obviously an island at the western end of Europe, and we have two very different coastlines. So on the west Atlantic coast, we have the dramatic cliffs, and then on the east, we have the more sandy sloping coastline. So it poses different risks to those two coastlines. But actually, while it might seem that the west coast is maybe more vulnerable, all of Ireland is all the heritage across Ireland is under threat from climate change.
What particular sites under threat? I mentioned Doonbeg Fort and the Rock of Cashel. What else?
There are numerous sites, and the Department of Culture, Heritage and Gaeltacht have outlined just the volume of risk, and as I say, it is right across Ireland. So we're here in Dublin, and Dublin itself is at risk from flooding due to climate change. So Dublin City would be at risk from riverine and coastal flooding. So one site, for example, would be Trinity College Dublin itself, actually, because within the campus walls there is a density of historic buildings, and because of where it's situated so close to the Liffey and so close to the coast, if there is a continuation in sea level rise, which it's projected there will be, many of those buildings could be at risk from flooding.
Some of these suggested solutions by archaeologists and other heritage experts are that some vulnerable coastal sites could be moved inland or even taken indoors. This isn't like garden furniture. Is that possible?
It is actually possible, and there is international precedence for this happening. It has happened in other places. So there is a site up in the Orkneys which was damaged by a coastal storm and was literally picked up and moved inland. And this was sort of from pressure from the local community, because they wanted their heritage preserved and they wanted the stories associated with that heritage preserved for future generations. So it has been suggested, and it probably will continue to be suggested, along with many other options.
The short-term option of closing heritage sites seems like the most immediate solution.
Yes, indeed, but we have to think about how those sites are preserved. If they're just closed, that's not going to preserve them in the long term. So I think we have to think creatively and maybe think outside the box in terms of how we approach preservation. So we live in a digital era, so we can think maybe more creatively about getting digital technologies involved. In many sites, you might find VR, virtual reality, being used, so to allow people to access sites which are no longer physically accessible. So that could be an option.
Sarah, thanks for coming in. That's Dr. Sarah Kerr, based at Trinity's Longroom Hub of Arts and Humanities, speaking about the vulnerability of Irish heritage sites to climate change. Almost 9:01.